75 years ago, several hundred Chinese women and children arrived in New Zealand as refugees, fleeing from the atrocities of the Japanese occupation of China during World War II. I'm Lynda Chanwai-Earle, bringing you this Eyewitness program about their stories of survival.
I came out, I was only about 3. I came out with my eldest sister and my younger brother, he was a year younger than me, and my mother, yes.
At the age of 3, I wonder how much you would remember about the journey.
Nothing. I know, it's pretty bad, but I believe we travelled by night and hid during the day, you know, because of the Japanese occupation during then. And I think my mother, she was reduced to practically just skin and bones by the time we arrived over here. So we went through, I believe, quite a hard time. But we were lucky that my elder sister, she was really a box of birds, and she was, you know, running up and down the boat and getting us our food and things like that. Otherwise we wouldn't have, you know, made it.
Survival was the key for children like former refugee Doris King. The event centre at Alexandra Park in Auckland is filled with generations of families celebrating the 75th anniversary of Chinese war refugees arriving in New Zealand. Correspondent Justin Gregory is attending the acknowledgement of New Zealand's humanitarian act of accepting women and children fleeing the brutal Japanese occupation of war-torn China. The New Zealand Chinese Association appealed to the government to allow Chinese men to bring their families here. Of the 244 women and their 239 children who arrived in 1939 and 1940, it's the children, now in their 70s and 80s, who are the remaining witnesses. Event organiser Richard Leung, the chair of the New Zealand Chinese Association, Auckland.
Pretty much they were escaping for their lives, and they had husbands in New Zealand, and obviously the husbands in New Zealand were very worried about their children and their wives and whether they were still alive or whether they were still alive after the war. So the government of the time, with the lobbying by the NZCA, or New Zealand Chinese Association, were able to secure people to come out, wives and their children. They had to pay a £200 bond, which was non-refundable. So we're talking about 1938-39.
A lot of money.
Which is a lot of money, yes. And then they had to still make the journey from Guangzhou in China to Hong Kong, which was a 7 to 8 day walking trip. And that was trying to walk through Japanese aeroplanes bombing them, bandits. So to come this far has been something that we need to celebrate as a community.
My name is Kenneth Huey Chan.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, you are actually one of the war refugees.
Yes, I am. In fact, the New Zealand Herald's got a photograph of my family and myself arriving on the very first day. That was on the 10th of October 1939. We landed on Auckland Wharf, and the New Zealand Herald snapped a photograph of us.
How old were you?
I was 7 years old when we arrived. We came on a boat in those times.
And where had you walked from to get to the boat?
My village I came from is called Hagi. It was an island in South China, about a couple of hours from Hong Kong. And when the Japanese were bombing Guangzhou at that stage, we were lucky enough to get the Chinese in New Zealand already here could bring their families out. So we were one of the lucky ones. My father and my uncles were already in New Zealand. In fact, my grandfather came here in 1905, around that time. So we had connection with New Zealand for quite some time.
Do you remember the journey to get to the boat to travel to New Zealand?
Yes, we all walked. In fact, I can still recall a long, long railway line, and most of the refugees from the villages anyway, so we walked, you know, day and night walking along the railway line, which we knew would take us to Hong Kong.
How long did you have to walk for?
I can't remember exactly, but at that age group, it seemed like a long time.
And I'm sorry to have to ask, but did all of your family make it out with you?
Yes, we were very lucky. In fact, one of our heads of our village, he was one of our guards, because in the village we quite often had bandits, and he had a rifle with him. So our group was lucky. We had a guard virtually walking along with us, escorting us to Hong Kong, one of our village headsmen with a rifle. So we were a very lucky group.
What do you think your life would have been like if you hadn't been able to leave China?
Well, I think, as we know, many of our relatives, even in Hong Kong during the war, I lost some elder relatives through even the bombing of Hong Kong.
And it was the bombing of Hong Kong harbour that Jack Chan remembers most vividly as an 8-year-old unable to leave during the occupation. Ironically, Jack's wife Marcy was one of the children on the boats, but at age 4 she was too young to remember anything but seasickness. At their home in Wellington City, I have the opportunity to hear their accounts of survival.
I know I was on a boat and it wasn't very nice. They gave you, what was it, bread or something? From
Bread and water,
water,
probably.
something like that.
Yeah.
Yes, wasn't very much, you know.
So you were hungry and seasick and
I was seasick, all right.
seasick. And a lot
I
of
think
children
so.
would have been
Children,
very
yes. No,
sick.
I'm not a very good sailor. Even now I get seasick on a boat.
Do you remember how long the trip took from
I don't know. I can't remember.
Hong Kong? It was
Yeah,
from
Hong
you
Kong.
left Hong Kong.
Yes.
Do you remember anything at all about? So you went with your mother and your.
Yes, my brother and my mother. Because Dad was still in New Zealand. He's a New Zealand born. So he
Chinese,
was,
yes.
Yes, and we just came on the boat.
When you talk about refugee, this is where my life of being refugee came from. Within a year or two, my father decided to take off from Hong Kong and went to my mother's village. In those days, you weren't allowed to travel freely, so we we actually thought it was quite fun. We all bought our supply, carry around our waist, and we went to my mother's village on foot to escape the notice of actually two regimes. One, of course, is the Japanese. You weren't allowed to, you weren't meant to let them notice you're trying to run away. So we actually travel by night and sleep by day.
How many
hiding.
of you, Jack? How many?
Oh, a whole family. I've got my father, my mother, 4 siblings.
So you're the only boy? Of the
I was the
family?
only boy, yes.
So all 6 of you were travelling about at night, hiding, going from.
Hiding around, maybe caves or under trees or
In the
or
bush.
somewhere in the bush, and just to make sure that we weren't spotted by, first of all, the Japanese, and the other regime of soldiers you need to avoid in those days is all nationalists. Kuomintang, yeah. And in the rural parts, there were Red Army around. We want to avoid being spotted by them too, almost as dangerous as being spotted by the Japanese. But eventually, a few days travelling on foot, we arrived at my mother's village, and we were there for about a year or so. They smuggled ourselves back to Hong Kong and stayed there for the rest of the war.
Did you know of families that were murdered by the Japanese?
Those things happen all the time. You hear people dying, see people dying.
So you witnessed people being shot on the street?
Pretty hard life.
It's hard.
But and then you live under any condition, you get used to any condition. So once things settle down a bit, although we're under Japanese rule, of course, being enemies, when in your mind, you always try to avoid any conflict with them. You play along with the system. At school, you're forced to learn Japanese, so you learn Japanese. because the military part of Japan, once they've occupied it, then they withdrew the forces to some other war zone.
I see. So they just kept forces there just to maintain civil control.
Yeah, until towards the end of the Second World War, and other forces, but in particular the American forces, came and tried to reoccupy Hong Kong for the Allies. And we thought it was great fun. We lived halfway up the hill in through a small window. We saw these Japanese and these American plane dive bombers diving onto the harbour and drop bombs on the warships, Japanese warship. We thought it was great fun. It's just like watching a movie.
Goodness
But
me.
kids being kids, man, that's what you
So
do.
you were watching these
and of
planes
course we cheer, because the songs that the bomb hit the target.
and you'd cheer when the Allied planes would hit the targets.
I guess I was about 3 years and 8 months from 8, so about 11 or 12, yeah.
What was it like trying to get food? Was it hard?
Well, food was hard.
I mean, you
but we
say that you
managed,
were quite
we managed.
well off as a family, but you must have used all your resources.
Actually, we were quite well off before the war, but the Japanese actually confiscated all my father's assets. He owned a theatre, and the Japanese wanted the theatre for military purposes. No, they didn't use it as a movie theatre, as such, used as a headquarters, some kind of quarter for the military. Because being a theatre is a big place.
So they just took it over?
Yeah, they took it over.
What
They
they
just
wanted?
took the assets, yeah. And
And
I
that
don't
went
know
for
why
everybody?
at the end of the war we didn't get it back. I was too young to know about these things. Oh, yes, that's right. That's right. By that time, my father died. He actually died during the war.
It must have been very hard for your mother.
Yes, my mother knew nothing about running businesses, and we had very good relatives, and we rely on help from the relatives to, well, not so much for living, for any other things that we needed to do. Because we were too young. My elder sister was married by then, and she was living in China. So the eldest one was myself and 2 younger sisters. And the youngest sister subsequently died. And so we're 3 of us, my brother, myself, and my young sister. And after the war, we're looking at coming back to New Zealand because we're New Zealand citizens. Somehow, I didn't do the organising, somebody else helped.
Were you
my
all
father
born
to
in
do.
New Zealand?
Yeah, we were all in New Zealand.
All 4 of you?
Our whole family was born in New Zealand.
The 4 siblings?
I'm a second generation. My father went there in the turn of in the late 1800s, actually. My mother went there, and she went there in the early 1900 something or other.
I mean, from China to New Zealand? Yes.
Yeah. And I was born in 1930, so she's been there for about 30-something years.
Here in New Zealand?
Yeah. But she also have been back to China several times.
So when you came back here, it was yourself, your mother, your younger sister, but one of your sisters passed away.
Yeah, my youngest sister. So when you ask Marcia about what she remember about the ship, I can tell you my memory about the ship.
Yes, tell me about your memory of the ship.
Well, that
I
was
think
quite a
Marcy was
story.
trying to
Yes.
forget it actually, because it was not a pleasant memory.
There were no aeroplanes as such in those days. There was, but very expensive. Usually travel by boat.
How long would it take, Jack?
Well, our particular one took 52 days at sea, calling to 2 ports. And near to the port we were allowed to get off because it was a cargo ship. 3,000-ton cargo ship was considered a very small cargo ship.
Chinese was sort of considered cargo too at the time sometimes.
Yes, but this particular cargo ship, 3,000-ton thing, at the rear of the ship, there were living quarters. 24 people in the cabin. My own female, they share the same cabin, and we have bunkers in there. And such a small ship, and sometimes in rough sea, the ship bounce up and down from bow to rear, and the rear, we were at the rear actually
Really
got so
bounced.
rough, the propeller got above the water,
Oh, dear.
so the whole ship just shook, and we were there, we just it's quite funny actually.
Oh,
the whole
sounds
cabin was
horrible.
shaken to bits, and we just had to live with it. But I'm one that I love to see. I can take it as rough as it comes. In fact, in the roughest stage,
Marcy's gone a bit green
Yeah.
listening to you.
I actually climb up on board at the rear of the ship and just watch the boat
huge
being
waves.
bounced up and down, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was great fun.
It sounds like not much could scare you if you're watching our Allied planes
No,
bombing the
oh.
Japanese warships in the Hong Kong harbour.
Mind
And
you,
then,
we were quite safe
Yeah.
at the vantage point. We live in a building. It's a tiny wee window, or about 2 foot by 1 foot.
huge storms out at sea, 52 days out at sea. Goodness
Yeah,
me.
that was rough.
What was it like when you pulled into the harbour? Was it Littleton Harbour in Christchurch?
Littleton, yes, Littleton. So that was our journey coming over.
Goodness me, 52 days.
And you asked Marcia what she ate. I can tell you what we ate.
What did you eat?
Every morning we had hard fried eggs, like rubber. And some of my friends, after that trip, after arriving in New Zealand, he refused to eat egg for about 5 years because of that.
We need to celebrate while these people are still with us, and we need to pass this history to our children, grandchildren, future generations of Chinese New Zealanders.